Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you some of the details regarding the Palestinians' efforts to submit a draft proposal to the UN Security Council, which, if approved, would recognize a Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. And it is as follows. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that his government and the Arab group have prepared a draft UN Security Council resolution which would push forward the efforts to achieve peace and correct the deficiency of the previous efforts to achieve peace by affirming the goal of ending the Israeli occupation and achieving the two-state solution. The Palestinians have submitted this draft resolution asking the UN Security Council to set a deadline of November 2016 for an Israeli withdrawal from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It also calls for a just resolution of the status of Jerusalem as the capital of two states and of the Palestinian refugee problem. The draft also demands an end to all Israeli military operations and settlement activities, the opening of all border crossings in the Gaza Strip, and deployment of an international presence throughout the Palestinian territories to protect Palestinian civilians. Abbas highlighted the potential diplomatic benefits that would accrue to Israel if it accepted the 2002 Saudi Arab Peace Initiative. The Arab Peace Initiative states that all the Arabic and Muslim countries are ready to establish immediate normalization of relations with Israel. The Arab and Muslim states, 57 of them, can immediately recognize Israel, and in return, Israel withdraws from the Arab-occupied territories. We are completely determined to move forward to take the rights in favor of our people within the framework of the political process to put an end to the Israeli occupation of territories of the Palestinian state within a precise deadline. The moment has come to stop the policy that wants to create a policy of apartheid established by Israel, and equally the colonization and the confiscation of land in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. In response, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the 2002 Saudi Peace Initiative is no longer relevant in the much altered Middle East of 2014. The question is not the Saudi Peace Initiative, Netanyahu said. If you read it carefully, you'll see that it was set up in another period, before the rise of Hamas, before Hamas took over Gaza, before ISIS took over chunks of Syria and Iraq, effectively dismantling those countries, before Iran's accelerated nuclear program, he said, referring to the Saudis' proposal that calls for a full Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 borders, including the return of the Golan Heights to Syria. Netanyahu noted that this plan was made before the takeover of Syria by al-Qaeda on the Golan Heights. Furthermore, French President François Hollande said that a solution to the conflict between Israelis and the Palestinians will be put to the UN Security Council. We will have a resolution to be presented to the Security Council that will say very clearly what we expect from the peace process and what the solution to the conflict must be, Hollande said. The French president said that stop-start negotiations had gone on too long, and there is a perception that there will never be a solution to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, even though we know the outlines of a possible deal. What we must look for is a durable peace accord, he said, adding that stalled peace talks must now reach their end. However, the text has not been formally circulated to the full 15-nation UN Security Council, a move that can only be done by a Security Council member. As a result, it remains unclear when and if it will be put to a vote. Speaking to journalists in Ramallah, Abbas said the Palestinians were meeting with representatives of the Security Council states to persuade them to accept the resolution once it gets proposed. We hope to get an answer within a month, he said. Of course, we are not sure whether the Security Council will agree to it or whether they will get the right number of countries to support the Palestinian cause. But whatever will happen, we have something to say, and we will put it in writing, and this is clear. We don't need to repeat it again, he said. Abbas added that once a timetable for Israeli withdrawal was set, he would agree to return to the peace talks with Israel. As soon as we get that, we are willing to return to the negotiating table, he said. Abbas said that the Palestinian Authority would reevaluate its security cooperation with Israel in the West Bank if its statehood bid to the UN Security Council was rejected, and added that the Palestinians would file for membership to the International Criminal Court if the UN resolution failed to pass. Israel's UN ambassador Ron Proser said that by pursuing this draft resolution, once again, the Palestinians are shooting in all directions, missing the real target. Their habit of bypassing negotiations by taking unilateral action and blaming everyone but themselves will only move the region further away from stability, Proser said. It's time for the Palestinians to aim higher and find constructive solutions instead of avoiding a real dialogue. Only when they start taking responsibility will the peace process be able to move forward. The Arab League reiterated its support for the upcoming Palestinian bid at the United Nations Security Council, demanding ending the Israeli occupation, and called on the United States to refrain from using its veto power to topple the move. Head of the Palestine and Occupied Arab Territories Committee at the Arab League, Mohammed Shia, said that Palestine would be heading to the Security Council with full Arab support based on a previous resolution approved by the Arab League. The Palestinian Authority has a three-step plan for a two-state solution that involves a UN Security Council resolution, and if this fails, an appeal to the International Court of Justice, and as a last resort, ending security cooperation with Israel, Palestinian sources said. Should the UN resolution pass, the Palestinian Authority hopes to negotiate with Israel on all the core issues, with the understanding that there will be a two-state solution within 2 years, a Palestinian source said. The U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said of the UN resolution that the United States has seen the text and has not had an opportunity to study it yet, so I can't comment on the specifics. As a rule, the United States doesn't typically predict how it'll vote on any given issue in advance. A Palestinian source explained that should the United Nations Security Council resolution fail, the Palestinian plan would move into phase 2, which would involve signing international treaties, including the Rome Statute. Acceptance of the Rome Statute would allow it to bring Israel before the International Criminal Court in hopes of forcing it to leave the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Joining the International Criminal Court would allow the Palestinians to pursue war crime charges against Israel. With peace talks going nowhere and Israeli settlements expanding, Riyad Mansour said the Palestinians have turned to the UN Security Council to force Israel to negotiate in good faith to end the occupation within a specified time frame. As a last resort, the Palestinians would consider dissolving its security arrangements with Israel, first set in place under the 1993 Oslo Accords. In response, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that any Palestinian push to try Israeli officials for war crimes at a United Nations tribunal would end any chances of reaching a peace deal with the Palestinians. If Abbas attempts it, this will have dire consequences, Netanyahu said. He could bring this before the International Criminal Court, destroying the chance of any reasonable peace deal. The Palestinian ambassador to the United States said that the Palestinians are not looking to have a conflict with the United States over their plans to obtain a UN Security Council resolution setting a deadline for an Israeli pullout of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In an interview, he explained the Palestinian position. He was asked, are the Palestinians finding resistance from the United States regarding its plans to obtain a UN Security Council resolution setting a timetable for the withdrawal of Israeli forces? And he replied, when President Abbas met with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Kerry did not tell Abbas not to go through with the Security Council resolution. However, he did ask for clarification and stressed that the United States prefers to advance the peace process through direct negotiations, and this has been the same U.S. position for a long time. He was asked, if the Palestinians know that the U.S. will veto any UN Security Council resolution for an independent Palestinian state, why are the Palestinians trying to submit a UN Security Council resolution on the issue? He answered, First of all, we hope that the United States will not veto such a resolution. That is why we are talking to them and talking to other parties, the United Nations, Europe, Russia, and others, to make sure that the resolution is submitted to the UN Security Council. We hope that the United States will understand that trying to get a resolution passed is not contradictory to the American position. We still have hope that the United States will not veto it. He was asked, do you believe that the United States can be an honest broker in the conflict? And what specifically would you like to see the United States do? He answered, everybody knows the importance of the United States. Everybody knows that they have always been engaged in efforts to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the larger Middle East conflict since the conflict started. We also know the special relationship between the United States and Israel, which the United States provides to Israel military and economic aid. Having said that, some people argue that it is difficult for the United States to be an honest broker when they are giving so much unlimited support for Israel. I still believe that there is a role for the United States to play in the peace process. They need to understand that the approach that they have taken over the last 20 years has not produced any results. Therefore, there has to be something wrong with the approach and the process, and a new approach must be considered that could involve the United Nations and the international community in order to arrive at a formula that would be supported by the entire world. We hope the United States will view the Palestinian efforts at the United Nations as part of a larger effort to get the international community involved in order to expedite the resolution. He was asked, you have included a timetable in the Palestinian proposal, although the United States has not agreed to one. Are you worried that this will create a conflict? He answered, no. We said that we want to reach out to people to specify a time frame for the end of the occupation. We would like to do all this in coordination with the Americans. We haven't reached the point of discussing the number of years, but in principle, we're specifying a time frame for the end of the occupation. We would like to do all of this in coordination with the United States. There has been in the past media reports that 3 years are needed to phase out the Israeli occupation. Nothing has been agreed to yet. However, it is important to see a specific time to put an end to this occupation. He was asked, if the United States agrees to your position and says, we have agreed to these things and we're going to not use our veto, then what are the Palestinians willing to agree to? He said, that would be the Palestinian best case scenario if we manage to get international support, including the United States. What the United States and the entire world should understand is that this is a genuine effort on the part of the Palestinian leadership to once again highlight the importance and the urgency to solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of ending the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian people, especially given all the changes and developments taking place in the region. I don't think we have the luxury of wasting any more time. It will be something that we welcome very much if the United States will support our effort, because the end objective is a peaceful resolution to this long conflict with Israel. Israel Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said that after a 50-day summer offensive against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, it proved that a withdrawal from the West Bank would be both irrational and outdated. He said immediately after Operation Protective Edge, Israel heard that now is the time for a diplomatic process. In this situation, can one even consider restricting the freedom of action of the Israeli Defense Forces in the West Bank, he asked? Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.